What is a war criminal? What constitutes a war criminal? Let me unpack that a little. There's been talk that Netanyahu will be pursued and potentially arrested as a war criminal due to his actions or the legitimization or authorization of actions in Gaza. Putin is regularly judged to be a war criminal for the criminal invasion of Ukraine. But the reason that Putin can't be pursued through the international courts for war criminality is because to draw the comparison, to make that claim, would draw attention to the numerous criminal actions and war crimes of your administration and of my nation. So who's the war criminal really? Is it Netanyahu? Is it Putin? Is it Tony Blair? Is it Barack Obama? Is it George W. Bush? Is the entire system based on criminality and who is allowed to kill and for what means? So, firstly, we've been fed a number of curious narratives throughout the Ukraine-Russia conflicts. You will recall the death of Navalny, the much feted and adored leader of the opposition against Putin's cancer-ridden tyranny. And we, all of us that peruse the legacy media, will be adjacent to certain that Navalny died as a result of Putin's actions, right? Putin killed Navalny. We all know that. I feel like I sort of saw an outpouring of grief. Like that Navalny, a person I'd never heard of before, was sort of sold to me as some kind of Forrest Gump individual that Navalny's dead. It's a dark day for all of us. And you know who killed him? That bastard, Tucker Carlson's on-screen accomplice, Vladimir Putin himself. Well, it turns out Navalny, well, if he was killed by Putin, there's certainly no evidence of it. Let's have a look. The Wall Street Journal reported on Saturday that US intelligence agencies believe Russian President Vladimir Putin likely did not order the killing of opposition figure Alexei Navalny, who died earlier this year while serving a 19-year sentence at a penal colony in Siberia. The Journal report said the idea that Putin likely didn't order Navalny's death is broadly accepted within the intelligence community and is the view of the CIA, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and the State Department's intelligence wing. So according to their own deep state, Putin did not kill Navalny. There's no evidence for it. It was a bogus claim. It belongs with the Nord Stream pipeline in the bogus fables that have emerged throughout this war to legitimize its perpetuation and the ongoing vilification of Russia. Of course, we're aware that Russia has its own propaganda, it has its own means of carrying out deep state activity and skullduggery. But when it comes to the death of Alexei Navalny, what we have to concede is this is a matter of framing. That the legacy media and establishment interests have been framing Vladimir Putin as a war criminal from the outset of this conflict, even prior to it. So will Benjamin Netanyahu be arrested as a war criminal? What constitutes a war crime? And if we accept that Putin is a war criminal, that Netanyahu is a war criminal, many of our fated heroes, members of the pantheon of great American presidents, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and hey, our hands are hardly clean here in the United Kingdom, Tony Blair too, would have to be regarded as a war criminal by the systems of evaluation that would likely be deployed to condemn either of those two. Let's have a little look at that. Here's Glenn Greenwald posting, Wall Street Journal reports that Navalny was not murdered by Putin, and I responded to that, you can see. Here's a video of Vedant Patel, Principal Deputy Spokesperson for the US Department of State on the matter.
But the crux of this for the United States is that we do not believe that the ICC has jurisdiction on this. That being said, we work closely with the ICC in a number of key areas. We think that they do important work as it relates to Ukraine, Darfur, Sudan. But again, on this particular instance, they just do not have jurisdiction.
Okay, so it's not just a bureaucratic response. It appears that US interests are actively working to prevent an arrest taking place. And that is, of course, likely because they would be judged to be accomplices in such criminality, as well as the historic crimes. Indeed, empire itself necessitates criminality and war criminality in particular. Increasingly on this show, we've come to recognize that war is the business of the establishment. So let's have a look at war criminality and what constitutes a war crime in a little more detail. The US and Israel are working together to prevent the International Criminal Court from issuing an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Haaretz reported that the Israeli government is working under the assumption that arrest warrants could be issued as soon as this week. The report said the US is already engaged in an effort to block the warrants. Any criminal investigation into Netanyahu also implicates Biden, since he's provided so much support for the Israeli campaign in Gaza. The US, Israel's leading arms supplier, has opposed the ICC's Palestine investigation from the start, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying in a 2021 statement that the court has no jurisdiction over this matter because Israel is not a party to the ICC. So it's a matter of jurisdiction rather than a matter of ethics, morality, or criminality. What Blinken is saying there is, who are the ICC to tell us what's a war crime? Shut your mouths, for God's sake. The Biden administration vocally supported the ICC's decision to issue an arrest warrant for Putin over war crimes committed in Ukraine, even though neither Russia nor Ukraine are parties to the Rome Statute. So they were willing to legitimize the ICC's arrest warrant when it came to Putin. So who is a war criminal? Well, whoever the establishment says is a war criminal. What is a pandemic? Whatever the WHO says is a pandemic. Thank the Lord we can bring you this content because of the support of our sponsors. Support them if you can. Today I want to talk to you about Field of Greens. It's the healthiest thing I do every day, and I want you on this journey with me, side by side. It's literally one scoop a day. It tastes great. My favourite is the original flavour, and it's completely improved my life. This is nutrition the way that nature intended, in a scoop. Here's what I noticed since I started taking Field of Greens. Way more energy over the course of the day. Sleeping better at night, like a baby. As you know, they're truculent and difficult at night time, so I sleep better than one. Healthier hair and skin. It helps with my digestion. My stomach feels better. I feel better overall, and I think healthier and stronger. Field of Greens is radically different. Each organic fruit and vegetable was medically chosen to support the heart and vital organ health. I trust Field of Greens to keep me healthy. I promise you're going to love this product, but if for any reason you don't, they'll give you 100% money back guarantee. Now listen, I've got you 15% off your first order, plus free rush shipping. Visit brickhouserussell.com and use promo code BRAND. That's promo code BRAND at brickhouserussell.com. They'll know I sent you. Okay, let's get back to the story. Do you see that language is using its meaning, that principles are using their meaning, that we're being invited to participate in a kind of odd ontological wilderness where people can determine whose war crimes are legitimate and whose war crimes are not even war crimes at all, or at least don't fall within the jurisdiction of the people or bodies that might determine what a war crime is. What is a war crime? 20 years after the United States invaded Iraq in an act of aggression that paved the way for war crimes there, Pentagon officials have sought to block the Biden administration's efforts to aid the International Criminal Court's investigation of war crimes committed by Russia during its year-long invasion of Ukraine. While much of the Biden administration, including the State and Justice Departments and some intelligence agencies, support turning US gathered evidence of Russian crimes over to the ICC, defense officials have so far sought to stop those efforts because if you start saying, hey, this is a war crime, what is? Well, invading Ukraine for no reason, getting involved in their country. The next question might be, what the hell were you doing in Iraq?
I didn't do it.
Those officials oppose US involvement in the ICC's investigation because they fear it would set a precedent that could one day lead to the prosecution of Americans for past or future crimes, a concern long voiced by multiple US administrations, including the current one. When the US invaded Iraq in March 2003, it did so neither in self-defense nor with the authorization of the UN Security Council. So there are predeterminates and conditions that decide whether or not something's a war crime, making the war illegal under international standards. Documented and alleged war crimes committed by Russian forces and contractors in Ukraine include, but are not limited to, massacres and other murders of civilians and soldiers, indiscriminate attacks on densely populated areas, attacking critical civilian infrastructure, bombing hospitals, shelters, torture, rape and sexual enslavement of women and children, and stealing children. Many stories of that nature were revealed extraordinarily by the publications of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, that espionage acting criminal still jailed for, telling us about other people's criminality. American troops and contractors have perpetrated each of those war crimes in US attacks, invasions, occupations, and peacekeeping operations in the years since the ICC was established. Clinton, Obama, and Biden are identified with the development of the war policy of American imperialism over the past 3 decades. Clinton, during his presidency, oversaw a series of US military interventions in the former Yugoslavia, including full-scale air war against Serbia and Somalia, as well as bomb and missile attacks in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Sudan. Obama continued the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan begun by George W. Bush while bombing Libya, supporting Islamic forces in that country and in Syria, plunging both countries into bloody civil wars. He extended the global pursuit of military confrontation with his turn to Asia, promising to shift the majority of US military forces to the Asia-Pacific theater to confront China. Biden's main focus since taking office has been to instigate, then escalate the US-NATO proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, to which the administration has devoted massive financial and military resources. So, when you look at the subject of war criminality, what you are essentially looking at is who decides what a war criminal is. Is Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal because of actions in Gaza, which many people believe to be genocidal? Is Barack Obama a war criminal because of his perpetuation of war crimes throughout his administration? Is Bill Clinton a war criminal? Is the entire system predicated on war criminality? Are all of us totally and entirely disenfranchised from the systems and actions that we fund through our taxes? Are all of us essentially participating in a state of criminality, not through any choice, but by default? So it seems that you can't even engage the principles of justice, because to do so would be to acknowledge that the system itself is criminal. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and the chat.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.